Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Pride. I know Pride is very different for all of us this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the work we all need to do to address racial injustice. And while our parades may have been canceled, Pride has not been. We celebrate the recent Supreme Court victory protecting LGBTQ employees, but also remember on this 50th anniversary of the first Pride Parade commemorating the Stonewall riot, that it was trans and gender nonconforming people of color who stood up for the rights of all LGBTQ people that led to this celebration. We hope this event on discharge upgrades for LGBTQ plus veterans will be helpful to you all, whether you're a veteran seeking a discharge upgrade, a family member of an LGBTQ veteran, or a provider wanting to help your clients in this process. My name is Jennifer Broomfield. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a staff attorney at Bay Area Legal Services, General Ernest A. and Marilyn Bedke Veterans Law Center. Prior to joining Bay Area, I've worked in a number of VA settings, including the HIVASH program for homeless veterans, the Veterans Justice Outreach Program, and as the first national program manager for the VA's Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Bay Area Legal Services. We are a nonprofit law firm that offers free legal services for civil issues to eligible residents in the Tampa area. If you wish to apply for legal services, please call 800-625-2257 or apply online at bayarealegalservices.org. We also have 2 statewide hotlines which provide telephone advice to any qualifying Florida resident. The Florida Senior Legal Helpline is available to eligible Florida residents age 60 and over, and their number is 888-895-7873. I work on the other statewide hotline, Helps the Veterans Legal Helpline. Our number is 866-486-6161, which provides free civil legal advice to any Florida veteran, active duty service member, or their immediate family. Christy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Christie Bhageloe. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm so glad you could join us today to celebrate Pride Month. I'm the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services, which is a nonprofit that covers all of Florida. Prior to joining Florida Legal Services, I was a veterans advocate for almost 10 years.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up the slide deck so that Christy can begin the presentation.
All right, so today we're learning about discharge upgrades for LGBTQ veterans. The theme of this presentation today is going to be that nothing is automatic. If that's the only thing you remember, make sure you remember nothing is automatic. You really do have to affirmatively apply for any changes that you want to make to your military records. I'm going to start by talking about applying to the Discharge Review Board, which is the first level of review for a discharge upgrade. The most important thing to remember about applying to the Discharge Review Board is that there's a 15-year time limit to apply to the review board. So that 15 years starts running when you're discharged from the military. So assuming you're within that 15-year time limit, you can apply for an upgrade. There are no exceptions to this time limit. If you're over that time limit, we'll get to the Board of Corrections, which is the next level further on in the presentation. The form that you complete to file an upgrade is called the DD Form 293. There is a new version of this. It's a little hard to track down online, but be persistent. You will eventually find the new updated form. It is literally a one-page form. So I never recommend that veterans only fill out a one-page form to ask for the review board to change anything. I really believe in submitting a whole comprehensive package to the branch of service. Most branches of service have separate discharge review boards. So there's the Air Force Review Board, the Navy Review Board, which covers anyone who is a veteran of the Navy or Marine Corps, Army Review Board, and I think Coast Guard is under the Navy Review Board also. but you can find all of them online, and we'll also have a list of them in a future slide. So it's very, very important to put together the best possible package you can for your discharge upgrade. It's honestly very difficult to get a discharge upgrade in the first place. The boards are going to assume that the military did everything right when they discharged you. So it's up to you to prove them wrong to get the upgrade. I recommend talking to an attorney. Like Jennifer said, you can call the Bay Area Veterans Legal Helpline, and there are some other national organizations that will list if you're outside of Florida. I also want to mention that Jennifer did a great discharge upgrade overview a few weeks ago, so we'll also have the link to that further along in the slides. Before you start putting your package together, it's very important to request your military records from the National Personnel Records Center. They are not fulfilling records requests at the moment due to COVID-19, but it doesn't hurt to go ahead and get your request in so that it will be in line when we're finally back to normal times. So that's very important to get the records and take a look at them and find out if there were any mistakes. That's where an attorney can help you find out if there were any legal errors in your discharge process, because the boards will also request your military records, and they'll see everything that happened while you were in the military. It's also very important to gather up positive post-service history. I jokingly, but not really jokingly, always say that they pretty much want to see that you've been Mother Teresa since your discharge. So anything that you can use towards that, any education you've gotten, if you're raising children, if you're married, if you do volunteer work or are involved with a religious organization, all that helps. So definitely be creative when you're putting your evidence together. As I mentioned, the burden of proof is on you, the veteran, to prove that the discharge was somehow in error. The Discharge Review Board is not going to help you gather evidence or subpoena witnesses for your upgrade.
And Christie, it takes just a couple of seconds from when I pull up the slide in Zoom for it to show up on Facebook. So we have pulled up the new slide on the Discharge Review Board, but it hasn't gotten to Facebook quite yet.
Okay, I'll see a little bit. So we're still on the Discharge Review Board process.
We're there now.
Got it? Okay.
Yep.
So there are a couple different options at the Discharge Review Board level. You can ask for a records review only, which is basically you're asking the review board to make a decision based only on the military records and other evidence you submit. So it's a paper only review. The second option is to ask for a personal hearing. The various boards are located in different locations. Some of them have some travel dates, but they don't travel around a lot. So it might be a long time before you can get one of those travel board slots. So assume worst case scenario, you would have to show up for a personal hearing in Washington, D.C. or wherever the board is located. And you probably are not surprised to know that the government is not going to pay for your trip to D.C. or wherever the board is. So that is all on you. You can ask witnesses to testify at your hearing, but you will have to pay for them to appear at the hearing and pay for their travel. And also very important to remember that it is a true hearing, and the members of the Discharge Review Board can aggressively question you. So I always recommend to start with the paper records review first. That way you get 2 bites at the apple. Because it is so difficult to get an upgrade, why not give yourself as many chances as possible to get that upgrade granted? So you can ask for the paper records review first, and then if you are denied at that level, you can still ask for a personal hearing as your second bite at the apple. However, the reverse is not true. If you go for the hearing first and are denied, you cannot go back and ask for a paper records review. Your only option would be to appeal to the higher level Board of Corrections.
And while we're waiting for the slides to catch up on Facebook Live, the one exception to having to go to DC for a personal hearing, personal appearance hearing, is the Board for Correction of Naval Records. So sailors and Marines can request a telephonic hearing. It's not a guarantee, but they can make that request. And we're up to types of evidence to submit.
All right. Thank you for mentioning that, Jennifer. And it's also, it never hurts to ask for a telephone hearing if that's the only way you can appear. We are in the middle of a pandemic, so it's possible to say yes, whereas they previously would have said no to that. So my theory is it never hurts to ask. The worst they can do is say no. So types of evidence to submit. I mentioned this a little bit already, but this is a more detailed list of what military records you need to focus on. So if you're a combat veteran, that's very important to mention in your personal letter to the board. Also note any combat awards you may have received, any good conduct medals, positive performance evaluations. If you served in the military for a long time before your bad discharge, also note that. If you were treated for PTSD or military sexual trauma, either before, during, or after your military service, that's very important to note. Civilian records. So as I mentioned, the board wants to know what you've been up to since your discharge from the military. It's very, very crucial to get character references if you can. If you have an employer or a volunteer supervisor or some sort of religious leader who would write you a letter speaking to your good character, that would really help you in front of the discharge review board. And you can include any volunteer work you do, awards you've won in the community. If you've had a pretty steady history of employment, that's good to mention also. A clean criminal record is really, really good to show if possible. That way you can show even if there was some criminal misconduct during your time in the military, if you have been able to stay out of trouble since then, that really helps you with your case. If you've gone to school for either any sort of vocational training or a college degree, definitely mention that. Include your graduation certificate or diploma, a copy, of course, because you will not get anything back from the discharge review board. So please do not send originals with any of this. And that goes for marriage and birth certificates also. The board considers it positive if you are married and have children that you're supporting. Medical records. If you have access to healthcare and you've been getting treatment for any sort of mental health condition that may have happened while you were in the military, that is a really good thing to include with your discharge review board package. You can be creative with the medical records. Even if you don't see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, if you see a social worker or a counselor at either at a vet center or any sort of community health center, definitely include that. If you happen to have a VA disability rating for a service-connected disability, you'll definitely want to mention that. Now, the gold standard, which is really hard to get, is if you can get a letter from a doctor assuming you develop PTSD or were a survivor of military sexual trauma during your time in the military. If you can get a letter from a doctor connecting that trauma you suffered to the misconduct that led to your discharge, that's the gold standard.
Okay, and just a couple of seconds before the slide gets to Facebook Live.
Okay, so this is the next level of corrections boards called the Board of Corrections for Military Records or the Board of Corrections for Naval Records. So this is the board you go to if you are denied at the Discharge Review Board. If you've exhausted all your appeals at the Discharge Review Board level, then you move up to the Board of Corrections. You would skip straight to the step if you were discharged more than 15 years ago, or if there's certain things you're asking for that only the Board of Corrections has the power to grant. So we'll go into that. So the form that you use to apply to the BCMR is called the DD-149. Again, there's an updated version that you kind of have to treasure hunt for, but it is online. Again, it's a one-page form. Please do not just fill out a one-page form for an upgrade. Get whatever help you need to put together a comprehensive package, because this is really the end of the line. This is your last option. It's the Board of Corrections, unless you want to go to federal court, which we're not getting into in this webinar. The BCMR technically has a 3-year deadline to apply. So say you were denied at the discharge review board level, technically you should file your DD 149 within 3 years of that denial. However, the BCMR is much nicer about waiving the deadline. So you can get creative with this too. If you didn't realize there was a 3-year deadline to appeal your last denial, if you've never talked to an attorney about the case until now and you just didn't know you had any rights, maybe you didn't realize you could even apply for a discharge upgrade at all. Just mention that and ask them to waive the deadline in the interest of justice, and they usually will. The BCMRs have broader authority and more power to change military records than the DRBs do. However, if you are within that 15 years since your discharge, you do have to try the DRB avenue first before going to the BCMR. There are some exceptions, and they do apply to this presentation since we're focused on discharges under Don't Ask, Don't Tell or prior policies. The BCMR is the only level of board that can change your name or gender marker on your military records. And Jennifer will get into that a little bit more later.
All right, and we're waiting for the next slide to load up onto Facebook. But it will be continuing Christie's discussion about the Board for Correction of Military Records and the sort of practice tips. And here we go, it's live now.
So another big difference between the BCMR and the Discharge Review Board is there's really no option for a personal hearing. There is a box you can check on your DD 149, but they do not grant personal hearings. They've granted maybe 1 or 2 over the past few decades. So definitely do not count on a personal hearing. So that makes it even more critical to present your best case on paper. Again, be sure to request your military records from the National Personnel Records Center or the Records Management Center, and submit that with a comprehensive package highlighting your favorable records and anything that you think was an error or injustice that happened during your military service. Now, the happy ending, if your discharge upgrade is granted, a new DD 214 will be issued, and the Veterans Health Administration and the Veterans Benefits Administration must use that upgraded discharge to determine if you're eligible for benefits. So they can't just go back and look at your old DD 214 that made you possibly ineligible for benefits. They have to go with the upgraded one.
Okay, thank you, Christie. So that was in, about 15 minutes, a very quick and dirty overview of discharge upgrades in general. As Christie said, on May 29th, I had done another Facebook Live event, which was, again, sort of a general discussion of discharge upgrades, but there's lots of good resources online. When attorneys go for trainings on discharge upgrades, they can spend 8, 10, 12, 15 hours getting trained. So obviously in 15 minutes, we're not going to be able to cover everything. But the other Facebook Live event talks about the standards of review that the boards are going to look at. And there are many good discharge upgrade guides online that are free, including one that we have at Bay Area Legal Services, Swords to Plowshares, Connecticut Veterans Legal Center, and then Connecticut Veterans Legal Center did a supplement just on mental health issues. There's also a very, very good video on YouTube. I highly recommend anybody who's thinking about applying for a discharge upgrade view, and that's Inside Discharge Review Boards. It was at the University of Montana's 2019 Veterans Law CLE, and those are 2 members of Boards of Corrections of Military Records, kind of giving the insider's view of what the boards look for. So having done sort of that very preliminary, what are the basics about discharge upgrades, let's talk about discharge upgrades specifically around Don't Ask, Don't Tell or prior policies. And you'll see in a second when the slide uploads that there's basically 5 different types of discharge reasons related to Don't Ask, Don't Tell or prior policies. And how you're going to address the board in your written statement or what issues and evidence you're going to need to present are going to depend upon which one of these 5 categories you fall under. So if the discharge is solely based on your identity, right, based on you identifying as LGBTQ+, under Don't Ask, Don't Tell or prior policy, that's a pretty straightforward discharge upgrade. And you're just going to have to present the evidence that, you entered the military, you were serving honorably, you didn't have any problems, you didn't have any misconduct, you were solely discharged based on your identity. It's going to be a pretty straightforward application. The others are a little more difficult, but they're not impossible. And I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from trying, even if there are some other issues going on. So what might be some of the other issues? Well, if you were discharged based on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but also some aggravating factors. And those aggravating factors could be misconduct that's seemingly unrelated to your identity, or it could be if they accused you of engaging in non-consensual homosexual conduct, which is the language that the military would have used at the time. Those are all aggravating factors. And so now you're not just going to have to address the fact that you were discharged because you identify as LGBTQ or you were perceived as identifying as LGBTQ, but you're going to have to address these aggravating factors, and you're going to have to present mitigating circumstances for why the boards should still grant the discharge despite these aggravating factors. And similar, related to that, is sometimes people may have been using substance abuse because of the emotional toll of having to be a service member, but not be able to be who they really were, right? To be working and living every day with people and keeping something a secret that shouldn't have had to be a secret. And so they self-medicated, much like a veteran who was experiencing a mental health issue might have self-medicated with substances. And if you were discharged based on substance abuse, but it was actually related to the emotional toll of being active duty during Don't Ask, Don't Tell or prior policy, you're going to want to present that to the board and make your case as to why, but for those policies, the substance abuse wouldn't have been an issue in your career. The next one is a pretextual discharge, right? So they're not putting anything down on your DD-214 about homosexuality or LGBTQ status or violating Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They've come up with some completely different reason, like pattern of misconduct, but it has nothing to do on its face. However, you know that that was a pretextual reason, that you were really being discharged because of discrimination and because of feelings that your commanding officer may have had about your identity. So again, you're going to want to address that. Yes, I know my DD-214 says pattern of misconduct, but here's the evidence to support why it really wasn't that. And the fifth one is probably the most difficult, and that's where you were kind of pushed to the discharge, not because of your LGBTQ plus identity, but that's not the reason, right? They kind of gave you the option of discharge now voluntarily so that you don't get worse bad paper if we go through a process. And it's really what we would call an employment law constructive discharge, right? They didn't technically fire you, but they made conditions so unbearable for you that you felt like you had no choice but to agree to the discharge. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the guidance that's out there to help you understand what you need to be looking at and putting into your application based upon the Undersecretary of Defense's memos that came out on September 20th, 2011, which is the date of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So next year will be 10 years. So I'm sure Christie and I will be doing this again in a bigger fashion, hopefully on September 20th, 2021. But this memo says and it was to the discharge review boards, telling them this is what you should do if you get a Don't Ask, Don't Tell discharge upgrade, right? And that you should normally grant the request if the narrative reason for the discharge to normally grant requests to change the narrative reason to secretarial authority with separation program designator JFF code. So they're going to change it. The narrative reason probably said something like homosexuality or homosexuality with aggravating factors. They're going to change that to just secretarial authority, that they should change the characterization of service from maybe OTH or general to honorable, and the reenlistment code to immediately eligible to re-enter category. Because if you were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell or a prior policy, your re-entry code may be 4, right? Which means you're not going to be able to re-enlist should you want to. However, to get all of those changes, 2 things have to be in place, and that is that the original discharge was based solely on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or a similar policy in place prior to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and there are no aggravating factors in the record, for example, misconduct. So if there are aggravating factors, then it's not a normally grant request. You're going to have to address those aggravating factors as you would sort of separate and apart from the Don't Ask, Don't Tell portion of it. But the military really wants to make these corrections. And as part of that, on the 5th anniversary of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we're going to see in a second when the slide updates, the Undersecretary of Defense sent a letter to all service members, veterans, and their families. And the letter encourages veterans who received bad paper under Don't Ask, Don't Tell or a prior policy to seek a discharge upgrade. So,
Jennifer, if I
sure.
hop in with the theme,
Sure.
Because it would make logical sense for something to be automatic about this, right? I mean, Don't Ask, Don't Charge, Don't Tell was repealed almost 10 years ago.
Right.
But unless you affirmatively file for an upgrade, nothing's going to change. No one's going to see anything from the military or from the Discharge Review Board just issuing you a new DD-214.
No, that's absolutely true. And there have been some bills that were attempted in Congress. They never got made into law, trying to make it an automatic upgrade for any people discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell or a prior policy. But unfortunately, they never went anywhere. So just like everything else, just like if it was a general discharge, there are lots of myths out there that, you know, it's automatic or you'll get it in 6 months. That's not going to happen. You are going to have to file for it, even if it's just a straight up, I was discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I have no aggravating factors. You're still going to have to do the paperwork and the late work to get that discharge to happen. So if you decide, okay, I'm ready, this is what I want to do, what are some things I should do for that? Well, the first thing I would recommend is going to this great website, upgrade.net. And it only goes up to 2015, but it is a way to search specifically for the issues that you're interested in. All of the BCMR and DRB decisions, right, for a given period. So if you put in decisions from 2011 to 2015, because you want to do it after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and put in the keyword homosexuality, you can also narrow it down to the particular branch of service, and you can look at those decisions that were approved and those decisions that were denied. And much like watching the Inside Discharge Review Boards, it will really give you a flavor for what is it the boards are looking for. What are they routinely approving? What are they routinely denying? So that can help you kind of build your evidence and how you want to write your statement to kind of be tailored to what the boards are looking for. So now we're going to talk about some sample language, and Christie's going to walk you through the sample language for DD-293s. We want to thank the Swords to Plowshares. They recently did a informational webinar, and I see there's a typo there. It wasn't June 10th, 2010. It was June 10th, 2020. So apologies for that typo. But Christie, take it away on sample language.
All right. So going along with the theme that nothing is automatic, you have to ask for each different thing that you want the DRB or the BCMR to change. They're not going to automatically change anything. So That's why this language is so crucial, to make sure you're asking for everything that you want changed. So an example of what to say is that my discharge is inequitable because the sole reason for it was my admission that I had engaged in homosexual activity, and there were no aggravating factors alleged in my discharge paperwork. Further, my record reflects high marks for my service. I have therefore met the requirement that the sole reason for my discharge was due to my homosexual act or admission. Please upgrade my discharge characterization to honorable if you had a general discharge previously. If you had an other than honorable discharge, you can ask for an upgrade to a general or an honorable. If it's based solely on don't ask, don't tell, definitely go for the honorable. And you also have to ask to change the narrative reason. Otherwise, they might give you the honorable characterization and not change the narrative reason, which would defeat the whole purpose because it would still say homosexual conduct. So literally, you have to ask for each little thing you want. So you ask them to change the narrative reason for separation to secretarial authority, which is nice and neutral, the separation code to JFF, and the reentry code to RE1. Now, this does not necessarily mean the military is going to let you back in tomorrow, but at least you have everything fully honorable on your DD-214, and if you're showing it to an employer or someone, there's nothing on there that outs you on your discharge paperwork. And you can also cite the Undersecretary of Defense memo that states that sexual orientation is a personal and private matter. So please do not include any remarks on my new and improved DD-214 that makes it obvious that it was corrected. Such remarks will naturally result in inquiries as to why it was corrected. And while we're waiting to switch slides, I do want to let everyone know that this is kind of a long process. Even if you're in the most simple situation and you just want a straight don't ask, don't tell, repeal, upgrade, that seems easy. It usually takes a year to 2 years to get a decision. And that was before the pandemic. So I imagine things have slowed down a little bit more. That goes for the DRB and the BCMR. So this is kind of a long haul. So be sure you're ready to start this process. And if you have a counselor you can go to and speak to while you're putting your comprehensive package together and writing your personal statement, it can be really helpful to have someone to talk to about it. It is an emotional process because you're going back in time to when you lost your military career unexpectedly and not in the way that you planned for. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add, while we can't get into VA character discharge determinations, because again, that could be a whole other 8-hour training, that is another avenue to get you access to at least VA benefits. And so if you're thinking about doing a discharge upgrade and you're not currently receiving any VA benefits, please call the helpline at 866-486-6161, and you can speak to myself or one of the other attorneys about how to go about doing a VA character discharge determination. So Christy, the next slide is up. Keep on going.
Okay, so it's similar language for the BCMR. They just use different terms on the DD-149. You can ask them to please make the following corrections to my record. Upgrade my discharge characterization from general under honorable to honorable. Change the narrative reason of separation to secretarial authority. Change the separation code to JFF, and change the RE code to RE1. So see, there's so many little steps you have to ask for, and you really do have to ask for one or it won't happen. The Undersecretary of Defense memo can also be cited here. And I think that's really important to include, and it's something I hadn't seen before. So I really appreciate Swords to Plowshares letting us share the sample language for you, that it is a personal and private matter, and you don't want any questions to arise when you show your new and improved DD-214 to someone. So that's just so important to cite, that they don't include any remarks that would make someone ask, well, why did you get an upgrade? Like, what went wrong the first time? What are you hiding? So that's very important to include.
Okay, and we're about to get to, I think, the last slide on DD 149 sample language, and Christie will take that, and then I will start to talk about the sample language for aggravating factors while we wait for Facebook to catch up with us. Okay, go ahead, Christie.
Okay, so the sample language for the DD-149 is my discharge is unjust because the sole reason for it was admission that I had engaged in homosexual activity and there were no aggravating factors alleged in my discharge paperwork. Further, my record reflects high marks for my service. I have therefore met the requirement. The sole reason for my discharge was due to my homosexual act or admission, and that is also credit to Sword to Plowshares.
And,
okay.
Well, we're still waiting. It looks like there's one more slide on the DD-149.
It's continued. So continuing on that paperwork while we wait for the slide to catch up. Even though I was, and you say, you know, however many years ago you were discharged, I only recently learned that I could apply for a records correction. So this is important to try to waive that 3-year time limit. Having homosexual conduct on my DD-214 has hurt my employment opportunities and prevented me from accessing veteran services. Having my discharge upgraded and the narrative reason for discharge changed would lift these barriers in my life. In the interest of justice, I request that you consider my application.
Okay, and I'm going to talk for a minute about the sample language that you would use if you had aggravating factors. So it's not just the don't ask, don't tell, but it's also any aggravating factors that may make it a little more complicated to get a discharge. So again, credit to Swords to Plowshare, not June 10th, 2010, because don't ask, don't tell hadn't been repealed yet. It's June 10th, 2020. So the language you're going to want to include if there's any aggravating factors is my discharge is unjust or inequitable. Now, again, if you go back to my prior Facebook Live event, you'll learn when you're going to want to say unjust, which is if you're applying to the Board for Correction of Military Records, and when you're going to want to use inequitable, which is language for the Discharge Review Board. They're basically the same thing. The boards just have slightly different terminology in their standards of review. Because I was discharged for admitting that I had engaged in homosexual activity, although I have minor misconduct in my record, I am eligible to have the board change the narrative reason for separation to secretarial authority, separation code to JFF. The characterization of my discharge is also unjust or inequitable because, and here's where you're going to want to give the reasons, right? Was the minor misconduct due to PTSD or TBI or to some other mental health condition, in which case, again, you want to go back and look at the prior Facebook Live event, look at the guides we've posted up there, because they're all going to give information about how to address mental health issues. There have been several memos from the Hagel memo in 2014 to the Wilkie memo in 2018, giving the board's guidance about how to address mental health issues. Undersecretary of Defense memo dated January 28th, 2011 states that sexual orientation is a personal and private matter, so please do not include any remarks on my new DD-214 that make it obvious that it was corrected. Such remarks will naturally result into inquiries as to why. Again, you have to tell them everything that you want. If you just ask for the discharge upgrade, you may get it, but you're not, as Christie said, you're not necessarily going to get the separation code changed or no remarks that wouldn't out you when maybe you didn't want to be outed in certain circumstances. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the process for transgender service members who want to request a name change. This is not automatic either, right? So even though you may have gone through the process here in Florida by using Florida Name Change.org and gotten your name legally changed in court, maybe got all your other documents changed, your driver's license, your social security number, all of that. None of that is going to have any impact on your DD-214. But here's where you can only go to the Board for Correction of Military Records or the Board of Correction of Naval Records. You can't do this through a discharge review board. They don't have the authority. So you're going to use the DD 149. You're going to submit your evidence of your legal name change, your court documents, any supplement documents that support that. The Transgender American Veterans Association has a great guide that goes into sort of step-by-step detail. If you haven't yet done your legal name change in Florida, if you go to floridanamechange.org, you can get help changing your name and your gender markers under Florida law. So that's sort of the first step. Once you get that, then you can go and get your DD 149, DD 214 change by applying to the Board of Correction and Military Records. Now, here's the tricky part. What if you are a trans service member and you want both a discharge upgrade and a name change and gender marker change? And you've only been out of the service for a couple of years. So you could ostensibly go to the discharge review board for the discharge upgrade, but they're not going to be able to change your name or your gender marker. If you applied to both boards, right, and thought, well, I want my 3 bites at the apple, so I'm going to do my discharge upgrade at the DRB, and at the same time, I'm going to file with the Board of Correction and Military Records for my name and gender marker change. It's entirely possible that you could wind up with 2 DD 214s, right? One that had your dead name on it from the Discharge Review Board, and one with your correct name from the Board of Correction and Military Records. So you kind of have to make a decision, and it's not a great decision that you have to make. You have to decide whether you want to just put all your eggs in one basket, go straight to the Board of Correction and Military Records, and hope that they grant both the discharge upgrade and the name change at the same time. If they don't, you can only reappeal to them if you have substantial new evidence that wasn't available to them at the time, or a new policy has come into effect that wasn't available at the time, or go to federal court. Or do you want to do the discharge upgrade first, take your 2 bites at the apple at Discharge Review Board, and if that doesn't pass, then go to the Board of Correction and Military Records. And as Christie said, each time can take 1 to 2 years, and we have no idea what the impact of COVID-19 is going to have on that process. So if you do the Discharge Review Board first, you could easily be looking at 4 to 6 years before you would be able to get the dead name off of your DD 214. Okay, and we are going to be pulling up some sample language for the name change for DD 149 as it slowly loads on Facebook. Okay. Christie, did you have anything to add about the whole dilemma of what do I do if I have 2 things that I need to ask for?
No, it's a really tough choice because they do take so long. It's hard to say what the best option is. If you have one of the easier cases where you were solely discharged based on don't ask, don't tell, and you need a gender marker change and a name change, then it's an easier decision to make to go straight to the Board of Corrections. It's most likely going to be granted. But with the tougher cases, it's a really hard call, and you would probably want to talk to an attorney about that.
Okay, so here's sample language for the name change. So this is when you're just requesting the name change. Again, credit to Swords to Plowshare, June 10th, 2020 informational webinar. Since separating from the Navy, I've legally changed my name and gender. I'm requesting that the name in Block 1 on my DD 214 be changed from Jane Smith to Jack Smith to conform to the enclosed judicial order. I request that a new DD 214, not a DD 215, be issued with my legal name in order to avoid invasive questions regarding the correction to my military records. In addition, I request that the name I served under is not stated in the remarks section of my newly issued DD 214, as that would defeat the results I seek from obtaining a new DD 214 and allow the injustice to continue. Namely, that I will have consistent identifying documentation and am not outed as transgender whenever I share a copy of my DD 214 with employees and service providers. Christie, any Any thoughts or comments on that?
No, I'm just laughing that neither of us caught the 2010, but I'm just going to say celebrating the fact that President Obama signed the repeal in 2010. That's the story I'm going with.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so what if after this very quick and dirty overview, you still have more questions or you want help with an application? What resources are available? Well, again, you can call the Veterans Legal Helpline at 866-486-6161 and speak to an attorney about the process. If you are applying for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Discharge Upgrade, Modern Military Association of America has pro bono attorneys who will help you through that process. It's a great organization. The Veterans Consortium also does discharge upgrades, but they are focused on cases where the veteran has a mental health diagnosis that was related to the discharge. So you have to, not every veteran with the Don't Ask, Don't Tell upgrade is going to be eligible for the Veterans Consortium. And I think we are ready for questions. If anybody has any questions, we'll give people a few minutes to see if there's anything they want to ask. And Christie, do you have any other thoughts or comments on everything we've talked about today?
Just repeating that theme that nothing is automatic, unfortunately. I sure wish it was an easier process and that it didn't take so much time. It's a long time to wait to get a correction.
Yeah, and I do have concerns about how much longer it's going to be due to the COVID-19 epidemic. I know that, or pandemic, I know that the National Archives, which is where you will go to make a request for your military records right now, is only processing emergency requests, and that they define that as homeless veterans, for funerals, or for medical reasons. So if you don't already have your military records, it's probably going to be a while before you can even access them.
But that gives you more time to gather up all your good civilian records to include with the package. So use that time wisely.
Exactly. And the civilian records are important. Post-service conduct is very important. Not so much if it's a straight Don't Ask, Don't Tell discharge upgrade, but if it's a Don't Ask, Don't Tell discharge upgrade and you have aggravating factors, or it was a pretextual discharge or a discharge, you really are going to want to highlight everything that you have done since getting out of the military and all of the good work, all of the consistent employment history, good credit history, anything that you have that can support that you have been a productive and thoughtful member of society. Now, if you have some minor or even maybe not so minor criminal stuff post-service, I still wouldn't have that discourage you from moving forward, particularly if it is related to any mental health issues you may have experienced in the military. If you can make that connection between the service-connected PTSD diagnosis and what happened post-service, you can and should still move forward. Well, we've gotten some thank yous for the helpful information and great language on the sample language, which again, I can take zero credit for other than having attended the Swords to Plowshare webinar and thinking, this is great language, we should use this. And we'll give it maybe 1 or 2 more minutes to see if there are any questions, but this will be recorded and up on Bay Area Legal's Facebook page. So if I talk too fast, or if you have some questions, or if you want to be able to view the slides to get the websites, just go to the Facebook page and you'll be able to stop it wherever you want and spend some more time on the information. All right, well, I'm not seeing any questions, so Christie, if you don't have, do you have any final thoughts besides nothing is automatic and ask for everything that you need?
Yes, yes, can't repeat that enough. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm really glad you could join us today and talk about discharge upgrades a little bit. Don't forget to check out Jennifer's other presentation that she did. It was a great 30-minute overview of the discharge upgrade process, and that's also on the Bay Area Legal Services Facebook page. So definitely check that out. And I hope everyone stays healthy and enjoys the rest of Pride Month.
Yes, everything that Christie said. Happy Pride to everybody. Please stay safe and stay well. And please do not hesitate to contact us if we can help you with any discharge upgrade questions. Have a great day and stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.